Often titled the father of comedy, Aristophanes is the oldest surviving comedic playwright. As profound as vulgar, his plays reveal ancient Athenian values, ideology, and controversies. Jeering at and referencing sex, gender, religion, politicians, history, other playwrights, and morality, he is now, perhaps, even more irreverent and funny than ever before. Plutus or wealth. Chremylus and his servant Chario are following an old, decrepit, blind man. They are just coming from the Oracle of Apollo. Chremylus explains to Chario that, since those who grow rich are the scoundrel and immoral, he asked the oracle if he should turn his own life to crime and injustice. The oracle responded that to become rich he must stick to the first person that he sees after leaving the temple and invite him home. Thus, it is that they find themselves following this old blind man. Chario complains and says the following.
You fool, don't you twig the god's obvious brief? It's to raise your son in today's way.
What makes you think that?
It's plain as a pikestaff. Even the blind could see that in our day the secret of success is to make sure you're rotten to the core.
This passage introduces the philosophical inquiry proposed in this play. The blind man eventually realizes that he is being followed and tries to get them to stop. Chremylus refuses to leave, and after a bit of a quarrel, the old man admits that he is the god Plutus. It turns out that Plutus was the god of wealth. In the following passage, he explains why he is blind.
But tell me, how did you manage to fall so low?
It was Zeus. He is envious of mankind. When I was a kid, I swore I'd only visit the homes of respectable, intelligent, honorable people. Zeus responded by making me blind, so I never could tell which were which are the good. It just goes to show how much the king resents decent folk.
When they're the very ones who pay him homage.
In other words, he is blind because, according to legend, jealous Jupiter blinded him so that he could not recognize who truly deserved wealth. Meaning, imbued into the mythological story, there is the explanation or justification of why the morally undeserving are nonetheless, sometimes, blessed with riches. This passage also introduces a recurring theme. The whole play frequently insults the gods, especially Zeus. I found it rather edgy. Chremylus offers to help Plutus regain his sight. However, the god is wary because the moment any person gains possession of him, the same person becomes wicked. Furthermore, Plutus is afraid of what Zeus might do once he finds out that he has regained his sight. Chremylus argues that Plutus is in fact the most powerful god. Zeus must have blinded him not because he was jealous of humans, but rather because he was jealous of Plutus' power. Yes, if the god of wealth could control whom he would favor, rather than merely stumble around blindingly, people would only pray to Plutus and leave Zeus without anything. I found this particularly clever, and it makes me wonder what the religiously conservative thought about this and the next claims. Apparently, during antiquity, this play became the most popular and frequently performed of Aristophanes. Once they arrive at Chremylus' house, Plutus makes the following funny remark.
God, how I hate entering someone else's house. It's never done me any good. If I happen on a miser's house, the first thing he does is dig a hole and pop me underground, and if a pal of his comes round and touches him for a paltry loan, he swears I'm someone he has never seen. And if it's the house of some young sot, I'm wasted on his tarts and dice and end up outside in my birthday suit.
Various people, mostly servants, gather around the house to ask what is going on and who is the blind man. Circa tells them what is happening and how soon they will all be rich. The people are jubilant. They become a chorus and parody Euripides' Cyclops. Meaning, whereas Odysseus blinded the Cyclops, they intend to give sight to the blind. In the end, the crowd swears to protect the deity and not let anyone take him away. Soon enough, Chremylus is wealthy, even though he has yet to cure Plutus' eyesight. It seems that that is a natural result of having him in your presence. Thus, another character appears, Blepsidemus, and accuses him of stealing and not sharing the wealth. Chremylus explains his situation, and together they decide that they must take Plutus to the clinic of Asclepius, the god of healing. Yet, before they can leave, poverty herself enters the scene. As you might imagine, this is supposed to be a repulsive old crone. She identifies herself and accuses them of planning something terrible. Blepsidemus is scared and wishes to leave, but Chremylus does not let him and starts an argument with Poverty. The leader of the chorus cheers for Chremylus as they say,
"Got to it. Marshal your ranks, trounce her in argument, and don't expose your flanks."
As might be expected, Chremylus begins by arguing that in a good world the good should prosper and the bad should suffer, as not only is that a good in itself, but it would also motivate everyone to be good so that they may prosper and avoid punishment. Poverty responds by saying, this was all written with rhyme and in a certain pentameter.
It amazes me how the two of you have fallen for such an obvious fallacy, you two old dodderers. Because if wealth does see again and can begin to give himself to everyone equally, no one will practice arts and crafts ever again. For once these have gone, who'll be at all ready to ply the forge, to build ships, do tailoring, make wheels or shoes, do bricklaying, or wash clothes or tan the leather, to plough the earth and harvest Demeter's gifts if you simply can, succumb to inactivity and do nothing?
In other words, without poverty nobody would work. When Chremylus points out that there will still be slaves, Poverty answers,
but slave dealers won't exist, you've just implied by your own premise. Would anyone take the risk in that shady traffic? You yourself would have to sally forth to dig and plough and also do every kind of boring chore you don't do now. You'll find life harder than it was before.
Lastly, she argues that Poverty, makes better men than wealth, not only physically, as the wealthy are gluttons, but the poor are laborious, but also of spirit and intellect, as the poor, unlike the rich, have to learn contentment and practice wit and intelligence for survival. Poverty even claims that she is like a good parent who is not afraid to scold and punish in order to keep discipline. Then the critiques of Zeus I mentioned earlier return.
No doubt you'll now say that Zeus, who is endowed with great wealth, has no intellect or talent.
Yeah, he lets this old hag loose on us.
That only shows that Zeus is thrifty and not naive. He has a great respect for wealth and doesn't waste it. He decorates the winners with trash and keeps the cash.
What you're really saying is that Zeus is something worse than poor if he's really loaded but behaves like the greediest thing alive.
Eventually, Poverty agrees to leave. Many would point out that Poverty's argument is similar to ancient Christian so-called slave morality. Yet, be aware that poverty as a sacrifice that bears fruits is more similar to the ancient Spartan ethics. It is a master morality claim. The idea of Lycurgus is that certain suffering yields a tangible good or improvement. The Christian ethics are that suffering yields ethereal, afterlife, benefits. Returning to the narrative, Cario takes Plutus to Asclepius' clinic, a magic spring. This is not shown. In the meantime, Chremylus sings a song. When Cario returns, he tells the story of how Plutus did indeed regain his sight. In this account, there is yet another joke on religion or faith. It turns out the people would leave offerings for the god, and Cario relates how, in the middle of the night, he saw the priest taking all the offerings for himself. Thus, Cario, driven by hunger, was motivated to go ahead and steal some of the offerings as well. To make the narrative even more impious, the following joke is present.
But didn't the god Asclepius stop you?
No, he was about to intervene, but then a funny thing happened. He was all set when my overloaded stomach let out a snort.
It must have filled him with disgust.
He took no notice whatever.
You mean the god has no sense of smell?
Not at all, only that he is used to eating excrement.
Several people begin arriving at Chremylus' house, each with their own motives. First, the honest man arrives to praise Plutus and relate a bit about his life's tale. His story is all too common. When he had the means, he helped his friends in need. But when times turned hard, none of these friends took the effort and pain to help him in return. Then Informer arrives. This one is angry that now that Plutus has regained his sight, he himself has gone from rich to poor. Cario points out that he must have been a brigand or thief, but Informer denies it. It turns out he made his money in the court or legal system, accusing people of breaking the law. His ally is a witness, and I suspect the purchase of witnesses was common, as it would be everywhere and when, but especially in the past without any true police system or criminology. In the end, Cario beats him and throws him off stage. The next visitor is an old woman. The story here is all too common as well, at least in third world countries where there is a lot of wealth inequality. She complains that her lover, a young, beautiful man, no longer wants her now that he no longer needs her money. Of course, it is more common for older men to tacitly buy the favor of young women. In this case, the older woman argues that she was nice to the boy, and the boy had promised to be with her forever, and that it is not right that Plutus should take him away from her. There are several jokes in which Chremylus points out how the boy was surely acting for the gifts and necessities. For example,
And he said he loved the fragrance of my skin.
Especially when you were pouring Thasian wine.
And that the look in my eyes was sweetly bland.
Yes, he knew how to play the game. He wasn't a fool. He knew how to sponge on a randy old dame.
the young man in question enters, and what proceeds are simply cruel jokes at the woman's ugliness and age. For example, as Chremylus is trying, vainly, to defend the old woman.
All the same, if you've sipped the wine, it's only fit that you should drain the dregs.
Maybe, but these dregs are prehistoric and stink.
You can use a strainer as a dredge.
The fourth to show up is none other than Hermes, or Mercury, the god of mischief and lies. He says that Zeus is angry. He explains,
because you've committed the most heinous crime. Ever since Plutus was able to see again, no one's bothered to sacrifice anything at all to any of us divine, no incense, sweet bay, barley cake, slaughtered beast, not a bloody thing.
And Cario replies,
About time, and they will not return, because in the past you never bothered to care for us.
Once again that impious criticism. Hilariously enough, Hermes ends up asking if he can live with them as Mount Olympus is fallen into poverty. Cario lets him come in and install himself as a servant god, one more impious humor. The last to show up is a priest of Zeus. As you might imagine, he complains of starvation as nobody donates anything to his temple anymore. Chremylus lets him become a priest of Plutus, and together, the whole company leave the house and march to the Acropolis, which has been voted as Plutus's new home where he might serve the city as treasurer. In my opinion, the play ends too abruptly and is not long enough. As I mentioned earlier, after his death, it became Aristophanes' most popular play, which is surprising. Either way, that is all. This is the last of Aristophanes' surviving plays. Make sure to check out the final analysis and compilation. Now, as usual, consider this aphorism I came up with as I read this play.
Poverty is a blessing, for not only may you take solace in its absence, but you may praise it as the cause of your virtue.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.